we've been reading a lot about the possibility of an agreement. Trump kept saying that a deal is possible. He is talking to the Iranians. They gave me a big gift, etc., etc. But Israeli media reported that there was a 15-point plan. The Iranians said that they have a 5-point plan. Clearly, we know that there is no convergence. There is no common ground between these two positions. Even Marco Rubio listed out his 3 points yesterday. So, do you think it's practically possible for both sides to reach an agreement at this point of time to shut down this war? And
Well,
if so, what are the possibilities?
well, I think it's going to be difficult, but that does not mean that it is impossible. I mean, it's a question of how far they might move towards one another at one point, and so I think the 15 point that the U.S. Gave to Iran, I think likely through Pakistan, was a non-starter, because these were kind of issues that the U.S. was peddling before the war in Geneva, and even then, they were not a given that the Iranians would agree to it or agree to all of it. So they basically were asking for Iran to surrender as if the war had not happened. The Iranian position is that they're looking for a firm guarantees that the war would not be repeated, that there will be no mowing of the lawn, as Israel calls it, every 6 months, that they would get genuine economic relief, that they would remain in control of the Strait of Hormuz, both as a source of revenue, but also as deterrence against future attacks. And I mean, there are other things they were asking for, but these are the most important ones. And I think the Iranian calculation is that the U.S. may think that it can escalate either the bombing or attack territory, and that would give it leverage to go to the table. But I don't think even President Trump is sure that that's going to be the case. And that's why he's beginning to murmur about, I may just leave. But the problem for President Trump, is that now he's set the goal of opening the Strait of Hormuz as a victory, right? So there might be circumstances under which that he could arrive at that agreement with the Iranians. But that actually requires him to get serious with diplomacy. So I think there's a lot of conversations are happening between Ankara, Islamabad, and Washington at a high level. And very importantly, the Pakistani foreign minister went to China, because the kind of guarantees that Iran wants, only China can provide. In a way,
I saw your post last night.
I mean, end of the day, Pakistan or Turkey or Egypt are great interlocutors. They have a channel to the White House, but they are not in a position to give Iran any kind of guarantees. They cannot provide any kind of a guarantee that there's not going to be a future attack on Iran by Israel or by the US. Not that such a guarantee is absolutely possible, but if there's one country that Iran trusts that could play that role, is China. I don't know what is China's appetite. I learned that they did issue a statement, a joint statement with Pakistan, which at least is indicative that that was the conversation in Beijing. That if they issued a joint statement, which is sort of some principles about how this war ends, perhaps the Chinese are laying out some rules for them entering in. So there's going to be sort of this jockeying between various sides until they arrive at a point. And with negotiations during a war, they could always collapse, right? And there's going to be more fighting, and each side tries to get an upper hand. But I think we're getting to a point where I think President Trump is really understanding that there's no easy victory here. And the costs from here on could mount exponentially higher for the global economy and for the US. And so he might be becoming more serious about exploring the diplomatic angle.
So let's say that, for the sake of an argument, if Trump decides to escalate it or send ground troops to Iran or to the Persian Gulf, because there were reports that he is already sending Marines and more combat troops to the region. When I look at the numbers, no, these are very limited numbers. He's not sending tens of thousands of combat troops, so which also tells us that he may not be planning to launch an Iraq-style or an Afghanistan-style ground operation aimed at regime change. It could be a limited strike. You never know. But what is your understanding? I mean, there were some reports, for example, Senator Lindsey Graham or others in the United States, they keep saying that the US has to take over the Kharg Island or some other islands in the Persian Gulf. So, is it possible to take over these islands, or even if the Americans seize these islands, will they be able to hold them? Because they will come under fire from the Iranians. What do you think about the possibilities of a ground intervention?
Well, a ground intervention that is kind of like Iraq or Afghanistan post 9/11, the United States would need 600,000 troops because of the size of Iran and how difficult it would be. So it literally has to go to conscription. It's not even, doesn't have even enough troops to do that. So I see that as far more improbable. Yes, it can try to capture an island, let's say Kharg Island or another island, and then it will have an issue of two things. How does it hold it under Iranian fire, and what might be the Iranian response, which might be escalation in the Gulf. So the problem there is not only that you might have Americans getting killed, but also the problem you're trying to solve can actually become more difficult. If your problem that you're trying to solve is to open the Strait of Hormuz and bring down the price of oil and facilitate trade, it actually may be counterproductive. As Iranians may hit oil infrastructure in the Gulf. Now, another 2 months of Marines fighting with Iranians, getting killed, the US threatening, etc., is not going to actually bring down the price of oil. It's not going to address the problem, right? So in a very narrow way, people like Senator Graham who are advocating this, they're hoping to get to a position where an invasion of Iran would become inevitable.